Ah, 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 oi, se na vida manigou, de pedra nasceu a história que grita. Omecas pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam na terra. A força africana brota, os omecas eram pretos. Oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. O Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os omecas eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas. Ah, 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 oi, se na vida manigou, de pedra nasceu a história que grita. Omecas pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam na terra. A força africana brota, os omecas eram pretos. Oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. O Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os omecas eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas.
Alright, we about to get it on and popping. You can give me a 1 if you could hear me loud and clear. We'll have a good time today. Just speaking about just the way that this Westerner, Mr. Roger Blench, completely destroyed African tribalism. Completely destroyed it. 100%. 100%. He destroyed it. And these UNESCO papers have been really, really good. You know, not only because they referenced Dr. Sertima, but because they've shown just the way that scholarship on the continent is being updated. It's been a really, really positive thing. And I think we should pay close attention to it. Definitively. Right? We should pay very close attention to it. So I don't see any ones yet, but if you can hear me loud and clear, I'm going to need a 1. There he goes. Shout out to Trigger. Shout out to Trigger in the building. Shout out to everybody who can hear my voice. I need to put a poll. I need to put a poll in the chat. I've been mad at the previous polls because I've been getting 80%. Like, I like 90%. I want 90%. I never tried this Q&A thing. Actually, let me exit that. Let me exit that. I'm gonna set up a poll right here. All right, let's say who was. Yeah, let me get this. This is gonna be fun. I mean, I think y'all will be able to enjoy. Y'all will be able to enjoy what I have to offer today. I'm happy that I could be, you got business booming. I could be live more often. That's really, really positive. When you handle it in the real, you can have fun. And we doing pretty well. We living good. So let me make this question a little bit more clear. Which scholar? All right. This is the poll. The poll is in the chat. So we finna get into it. I know it's kind of late for some of the folks on the east side, but we finna have some fun. Yes, sir. So I'm gonna break down, just, what, Roger Blench revealed with his article. And this is chapter 3 of volume 10 of the UNESCO Symposium. And I'm going to read it a little bit, right? So Roger Blench, he is a student of Greenberg, right? So he's coming from the Greenbergian tradition, right? So the first sentence of the second paragraph is interesting. He says African languages are conventionally divided into 4 continental phyla, language families, right? And this is a really important key because Afrikaner scholars, they use language family and phyla interchangeably. They don't differentiate. Whereas within conventional historical linguistics, phyla is hypothetical, whereas language family is confirmed. So yeah, from a historical linguistic perspective, they are phyla. But they have not been affirmed. So Niger, Congo, Nilo-Saharan, Afro-Asiatic, and Khoisan, as well as Austronesian and Madagascar. 2 of these phyla have significant speakers out of Africa, Afro-Asiatic, because of Arabic, obviously, and then Austronesian. So we know this very, very well. Good so far. So he gets into table 1 and number of languages by phyla, phylum being singular, phyla being plural. And this is the types of classifications applied to African languages. Why is this important? I mean, can anybody in the audience tell me why this is important? I want to get a little bit of feedback. Why is table 2 important? I think you got a few people in here. I don't know if folk got the notification, but for those of y'all in here, like, why would you say that it's important for us to understand, the ways that languages are being classified? Nobody's got it. Nobody knows. Oh, I did not mean to show that. I was just checking my thing. I was just checking the notes. Why do you think that it is important? Why? The reason being is, not all fields of historical linguistics are created equally. You do have distinct fields of historical linguistics. And right here, you can see that with respect to the classification paradigm. So, genetic languages, they share a common ancestor. Typological languages, they share common features, phonological and morphological, but they have no genetic connection. And then aerial, referential, these are systems that assign a classification purely for ease of reference. And usually, that's key trigger. Aerial is languages in the same area. So, you have Nahuatl and Spanish in Mexico to degrees in Oaxaca, right? You have languages in Africa who may be close in proximity, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're related. So when you're talking about Afrikanist linguistics and historical linguistics, the type of classification is a lot. So when you're saying languages are affirmed, this is genetic. And again, phyla, what I would change here is that with genetic classification, you're specifically talking about family rather than phyla, whereas sometimes you may apply the approach to languages that are not necessarily related, but you're trying to infer a relationship using the comparative approach. So, in the case of Khoisan, many languages became extinct in historic times, with only one adequately transcribed data to remain. Right? So, this is gonna show some records. Ethnologue is one of the main ones that deals with these records, right? And you can see here that he's talking about 3 categories when he says, living languages divided into 3 distinct branches, right? Now, with respect to Khoisan, there are living speakers of Koena, right, of Khoi and San languages. So if he's talking about, Proto-Khoisan, hypothetically, right, that would be interesting. But if you're speaking about these modern languages, as he's gonna describe later on, he's gonna deal with the debate that scholars have with respect to this topic. So he says, the classification of African language phyla has a wayward history, in part because of the simultaneous use of very different paradigms. There are 4 main categories that can be distinguished, right? So he obviously says that with respect to the classification of African languages, the genetic approach is not the main approach, right? The division into phyla owes much to the work of Joseph Greenberg, although there have been many changes and additions since his proposals were first set out. The coherence of the first 3 phyla is generally accepted among scholars, although single authoritative sources providing, let me scroll down a little bit, the type of proof usual to Indo-Europeanist or Austronesianist circles are lacking. This has led some non-Afrikanists to consider these phyla to be undemonstrated and perhaps no more than a series of independent groupings exhibiting contact characteristics. I mean, that's a mic drop. That's a mic drop. That's a mic drop. He literally is saying that Indo-European, Austronesian, historical comparative approach, genetic approach, the other phyla, hypothetical grouping, does not have the type of proof. And non-Afrikanists, the would-be historical linguist, consider these phyla to be undemonstrated and exhibiting contact characteristics. I mean, a lot of y'all don't even know why that's important. I know a lot of y'all, you're not really deep into, the linguistic conversation. so you don't really know why this is important. But essentially what he's saying is that the groupings in Africa are solely hypothetical. They're contact, they're based upon contact. They're not based upon a common genetic ancestor. So he says, debate on the unity of Khoisan swings back and forth, partially because of inadequate documentation of so many languages and the wayward transcription of cliques. Most Khoisanists considered that Southern African Khoisan did form a group in the 1980s. However, the most recent synthesis revert back to the prior model of the three phyla: Afroasiatic, Nilo-Saharan, Niger-Congo. So again, Khoisan has been proven defunct. Khoisan has been proven defunct. So this chapter reviews recent understanding of the composition of the major African phyla. It is not possible to present a consensus view, nor even in the space available, to indicate any detail the disagreements between the scholars. These can be followed up by consulting the references. All right, so Nilo-Saharan, that's Greenberg's waste bucket. That's what it's known as. It's known as Greenberg's garbage can, his garbage dump. The languages that he couldn't fit in Niger-Congo or Afroasiatic or Khoisan, he dumped into Nilo-Saharan. So Nilo-Saharan languages, we could say the Nilo-Saharan contact area stretches from Tanzania to Mauritania, with isolated speakers found in Upper Egypt. Nilo-Saharan has a distinction of being the youngest of the world's language phyla to be identified. Prior to Greenberg, there was no literature suggesting that a disparate group of languages stretching across Africa constituted a single phylum. Indeed, Tucker and Bryan treated many Nilo-Saharan languages as isolated units. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Heinrich Bach, he used the word Eastern Sudanic to define Nilo-Saharan. So you have the first, monograph on the phylum is Schederberg in 1981, followed by Bender in 1997 and Ehret in 2001. The validity of the phylum has been effectively asserted by a series of Nilo-Saharan conferences taking place since 1981. However, the internal diversity of Nilo-Saharan is such that doubts about its coherence remain, particularly among non-specialists. But to all intents and purposes, it can be treated as established. Come on. Right? He literally says it right there. Right? They've had all of these conferences, but they still don't know about the internal diversity of the coherence. So what method are you using? Are you using the historical comparative approach? Are you looking at the living languages to infer a pre-dialectical ancestor of these languages? Because how could you have had all these conferences since 1981, but you don't know about its internal coherence? That doesn't really make sense methodologically. So, and he's saying doubts about its coherence remain among non-specialists. So he's treating historical linguists as non-specialists, and the Afrikanist as the specialist, right? So if we're to use it as a working hypothesis in the Afrikanist camp, yes, it is. But among historical linguists, no. So, if you're familiar with the Cairo Symposium 1974, if you're familiar with, Obenga's, excoriation of Greenberg, you'll know why this approach is outdated, especially with respect to historical linguistics. And he moves on to discuss the diversity. But again, it's clear here, if you read the first paragraph, that they were not applying the genetic approach. They're applying aerial approaches. And of the remaining phyla, Nilo-Saharan is definitively the weakest. But here is the contact area, the Nilo-Saharan contact area. The languages within it. Songhai still in it, even though some people have considered Songhai an isolate. And again, a lot of these nodes aren't even established genetically, right? So right here it says Greenberg 1971 included Meroitic within Nilo-Saharan, although his evidence for this assignment was very tenuous. Despite this, it now seems that this intuition was correct. In addition, The discovery or reclassification of some languages assumes a maximal set of members as follows, right? So you see Songhai, Saharan, Mabin, Four, East Sudanic, Central Sudanic, Burda, Kunama, Gumus, Kuliak, Kadu, and Komen. And he says Nilo-Saharan presents a number of striking features by comparison with Niger-Congo. Its branches show no testing. In other words, they seem to be scattered across Africa, representing a series of individual migration. Each subgroup shows considerable differences, making lexical cognates and thus reconstructions relevant to early substance hard to detect. That right there is a bar, because he's basically saying that there's so much differences and so many migrations that there's no uniform set of reconstructions. And very little cognates, if we were to take, Blench's word for it. You have Sutton proposing a correlation between Nilo-Saharan and the Aqualithic, a construct, this is a material culture construct, relating bone harpoons, ceramics with heavy line decoration. Drake et al. Relate this to the Green Sahara, the expansion of aquatic resources in the Sahara some 12,000 years ago, which was responsible for images of species such as hippos in arid regions. This is supported by linguistic reconstructions and suggests the early Nilo-Saharans may have spread west in the pre-agricultural era, seeking rich subsistence resources along the lakes and rivers of the Sahara. So again, this is just aerial diffusion related loosely to the Green Sahara by some of these scholars. And, if this is the case, then we would have to assume that there was a lot of mixing prehistorically between Nilo-Saharans and Niger-Congos. A lot of mixing. Shout out to everybody in the build. So, right off the bat, we pretty much have a breakdown, but let's continue into Niger-Congo. Niger-Congo has more languages than any other phylum in the world. It includes the well-known Bantu languages, which are spread over nearly all of Eastern and Southern Africa, although they are only a sub-branch of Niger-Congo. Again, Niger-Congo has more languages than any phylum in the world and occupies a greater land area than any other African family. Again, Afrikanists, they're using phyla and family interchangeably. That's not what historical linguists would do. But when it's talking about land area, aerial diffusion, right on point. Right on point with that. Right on point. So figure 3 shows the present day distribution of Niger-Congo languages. If compared with Nilo-Saharan, one difference is immediately apparent. Niger-Congo languages form large territorial blocks, which with much less of the fragmentation and geographical isolation characteristics of Nilo-Saharan. Typically, this suggests more recent expansions and the gradual spread of more sedentary populations colonizing areas rather than moving rapidly along line features such as waterways. Nonetheless, Niger-Congo has its own perplexing problems. Why should Bantu have covered such a large area, and how is it that Kordofanian languages are isolated from the remainder, by a stretch, of Nilo-Saharan speakers? Making a tree of Niger-Congo, which again is this internal coherence, is no simple task. And we gotta stop right there. I don't know if y'all are noticing this. Give me a word in the chat if y'all notice what's going on here. If you are following what's going on, if you can notice what I noticed within the previous, he said making a tree of Niger-Congo is no simple task. What approach are they applying to the classification? What approach are they applying to the classification? It's the largest number of languages of any phyla in the world, and is far more internally diverse than Austronesian, its nearest counterpart. Formally accepted groups such as Kordofanian, Kwa, and Atlantic, formally accepted by Afrikanists. I would not say that Atlantic has been accepted. I would not say that Atlantic is formulated via historical comparative approach. I would say that Atlantic is more aerial. There may be few people who have openly disputed Atlantic, but Atlantic and Kwa, like when you say Kwa, are you referring to East Kwa or West Kwa? Right here, it looks like West Kwa is what he would call Kwa, right? There's a difference, like Volta, Niger would have been East Kwa, whereas West Kwa would be the languages that are considered Kwa. So like when you say Kwa, what are you referring to? Not every scholar agrees on Kwa being distinct. So there are also clear isolates which have no place with established families. So even within Niger Congo, he's saying that there are isolates. How on earth can, I mean, I don't know if I read this right. How can you have an isolate in a language family? Right? If they're isolates, or he's saying there's isolates that don't relate to the other families, you'd probably be talking about Dogon. You'd probably be talking about Mande. You know, scholars have, disagreed about whether or not Mande is involved with this. Yeah, they're doing a runaround. That's facts. They're not applying the genetic approach. You can see clearly here, because if you are applying the genetic approach, why is the internal coherence of Nilo-Saharan difficult? Why is a tree of Niger-Congo difficult? If you have defined this as a classification and you have living languages within the language family that you're calling, you should be able to easily build a tree, easily figure out its internal coherence. I mean, it's just pathetic. It's just absolutely pathetic. You can clearly see that they're not applying the comparative approach at all. At all. It's obvious. You should be able to easily do this. Right? What does he say? No branches of Niger-Congo have a set of generally accepted reconstructions, with even Bantu under attack. I mean, I gotta have some bomb. I gotta start using bombs. That's a bomb right there. No branches of Niger-Congo have a set of generally accepted reconstructions, with even Bantu under attack. Under these circumstances, any tree is likely to be controversial. Nonetheless, it is essential to understanding early Niger-Congo that we model its internal structure, and with suitable caveats, this is presented in figure 4. So he's saying no tree is legit. The internal coherence is not legit. This is all hypothetical. I mean, come on. You can see the tree right here. I don't want to go too fast through it. You got Dogon. Is that isolate? Mande. Is that isolate? Idjoid. And you have the Kordofanian branch, North Atlantic, Gur-Adamawa continuum, Gur-Adamawa area, Kwa area, Volta Niger, which was formerly East Kwa area, Benue Congo lineage. So this is the attempt to reconstruct Proto-Niger Congo. So all of the Congoid, Niloid, Somaloid, like all of these oids, you're being destroyed right here. Because again, Nilo-Saharan, they didn't use the genetic method. No idea about its internal coherence. Rapidly migrating groups that they infer are connected to the Aquilithic material culture, Proto-Niger Congo. Any tree is controversial. No uniform set of reconstructions available. I mean, come on. Right? So this is what he used to present the tree. The languages which retain the fewest Niger-Congo roots are likely to be the earliest to diverge from the tree. Languages lacking common Niger-Congo features, such as noun classes, verbal extensions, and advanced tongue roots, ATR vowels, are also likely to be the oldest splits. Right? So, I mean, look, I gotta, look. Hey, I gotta give Asar Imhotep a shout out, because, we've had our beefs back and forth, and, we have our disagreements, but I can't get mad at Asar per se, as these Afrikanists are running rampant. You know what I'm saying? I can't get mad at it. I disagree with the methodology that he's using. I don't think it's legitimate per se, historical linguistics. But the brother's a good speaker. He's a great speaker. He's prolific in a way, in a sense, within the African space. And it's like, can I criticize these other independent classifications if, you know, these Africanists are promoting aerial diffusion and contact linguistics, basically making it up as they go along? You know, Roger Blench is literally admitting it here. Really, really honest article, right? So this is really, really interesting. So all the features typically assigned to Niger-Congo are in fact characteristic of a mesolanguage. Mesolanguage. What is a mesolanguage? What is a mesolanguage? Yeah, meso. It's saying I googled it. It said Mesoamerican. Mesolanguage. What is a mesolanguage? That's a linguistic term. Man, it's not giving it to me. It keep going meso. I might gotta GPT this boy. I might got a GPT. I might got a GPT. I might have to verify this later on. I don't know what GPT. Mesolanguage in intermediate. Okay, so they're talking about intermediate languages, middle languages. So proto-language, meso-daughter language. Okay, Proto-Niger Egyptian subnode. You can see it been using, you know, some of my data, so that makes sense. It's a so he's saying that these are not fully reconstructed. They're like more aerial type features. So one of the more puzzling features of Niger-Congo scholarship and African historical linguistics in recent years are the authors willing to exclude various branches ascribed to it without evidence. For example, Gouldeman says that the present concept of the stock level unit Niger-Congo is conceived narrowly and that the families Kordofanian, Mande, Atlantic, Dogon, and Ijoid are not recognized as established members. In Dimendal, he excluded Mande, Dogon, Ijo, Vangian, while representing Kordofanian as a unity. And Blench is disagreeing with these scholars doing that, right? So, what's up with God T? You say you fold. I mean, some of this stuff can get wonky, but, you know, for those of y'all who, you know, you've read the UNESCO documents from 74, you're familiar with this conversation. You know, Banga and Diop, he started this conversation. So, but basically what he's saying is that these language classifications that are the source of tribalism are fraudulent. They're not legit. They never were legit. So that's really, really funny. So all the people talk about Bantoid, Bantu. He said Bantoid and Bantu represent nested subsets of Benue Congo. A large and complex group of languages whose exact membership remains disputed. Originating in Westerman's Benue Cross Flus, it took shape in Greenberg, Williamson, and De Wolf. Benue Congo was introduced by Greenberg, and Ukan, a smaller cluster of languages spoken southwest of the Niger-Benue confluence, may be part of it. Figure 5 provides a revised subclassification of Benue Congo languages. Bendi, previously considered part of Cross River, has been shifted to Bantoid, a change of affiliation proposed by Blench. Benue Congo is of considerable importance for understanding of Bantoid because of some languages exhibit features that resurface in Bantu, but which are only attested in fragmentary form or not at all in Bantoid. However, the Kainji languages in northwest Nigeria show striking evidence for Bantu-like systems, or more accurately, Bantu retains Kanji-like systems. The conclusion must be that these have to be reconstructed back to this level, and that therefore they must have been present in early Bantoid. So, I mean, the way that they're pigeonholing these languages is very, very funny. Look, is Northwest Nigeria the new origin of Bantus? If we're using this here, but it's all based upon aerial diffusion. It's not genetic classification. Right? Evidence for many Bantoid languages suggests that the noun classes can be radically restructured to the point where the correspondences with Bantu are difficult to discern, like Tikar. Tikar, and some of my ancestors from Tikar. The likely conclusion is that early Bantoid had a noun class system that it was relatively simple, and that it gradually evolved through reanalysis and class splitting to the complex systems found in Bantu today. Languages with no traces of such system must have lost it, despite a lack of segmental evidence for this. So again, when you're talking about, some scholars have disagreed with linking Bantu to Remenkimi because of noun class systems. But Roger Blench is saying they could have had noun class systems and lost it. Yeah, no, geopolitically they do this runaround. Because if black people knew how related their languages were, they would not be in anxiety in our languages or using primary unifying. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah, what's up, Hidden Scholar? These are two linguists. I don't know. I guess I anticipated more people knowing who Greenberg and Obanga were. But yeah, this is a topic that's been raging in Africa for a very, very long time. So, this is a debate about the integrity of African languages, the language classification. So, again, none of these classifications are based upon a uniform, universally accepted reconstruction. The reconstruction is basically when you go from a daughter language to its parent. You're able to recreate the parent based upon what you see in the daughter or the child language. So, in this group, I'm seeing Tikar, Northern and Southern Bantoid. Yeah, this is interesting. I've never seen a split like this. This is an interesting breakdown, because where's Bamileke, where's Bamanda with this? Where's Shupamim, Bamum with this? I'm assuming it would be closer to Northern Bantoid. But then here, Bantu is part of Bantoid, which is really bizarre. Typically I would see Bantoid and Bantu as separate. But Blench has Bantu as part of Bantoid. So, no, Hidden Scholar, most Afrikanists, these are the people who classify African languages. Most of these individuals are European. They're white. Most people writing about African languages today or historically are white. Now, there may be some changes now that African nations are beginning to have linguistic departments. For over the past 50 years, there's going to be some changes, but many of these scholars, they follow, they're stew pigeons for Afrikanists. They follow the Afrikanist approach, which is not legit, right? So you have the Obangian school of historical linguistics. You know what I'm saying? And I would say the Obangian school. So, I got to even rephrase what I just said because I was incorrect. In Afrikanist linguistics, most of these scholars are white, right? Now, there have been African linguists since, the beginning of time. The talking drum is one of the oldest versions of linguistic classification in Africa, one of the oldest versions of classification. So the way that we use drums, right? Those of y'all who are familiar with Mumuni Kuyate, who is one of the oral historians who compiled, primary documents and testimonies relating to Abubakar II's voyage. He is also a drumologist. And, he, from a linguistic perspective, would have retained a lot of, primary evidences and knowledge about African history. So the drummers and even the griots, to a degree, you could define them as linguistic within the African paradigm of social science or the African so-called humanities. According to the Obangian approach, hard science and soft science is not distinct within the African paradigm. So with respect to Afrikanist linguistics, yes, these are white people, typically. But historical linguistics with the Obangian school, you have Musa Lam, Mubabingi Bololo. I would consider Jean-Claude Mboli French, right? I would consider the Mboli side of things a little French. But you have the Obangian approach. You got Musa Lam and Siri Sar, Lamin Baji, Umdigi, Jean-Pierre Umdigi. You have myriads of linguists. Even Chare, one of the more controversial people out there. So, again, this is a little bit more wonky. And it says in this last sentence, in the absence of more extensive historical linguistics, it is assumed that individual groups split away from a common stem and develop their own characteristics. The order in which this took place remains controversial and will take considerable further work to resolve in a satisfying manner. So, absence of more extensive historical linguistics. So, again, this is not based upon the genetic approach at all. Yeah, see, this is bizarre. You got South Bontoid. You have grass fields and South Bontoid with narrow Bantu. This is a very bizarre. I don't know. I guess I haven't seen it put this way before. And Cameroon is the Bantu homeland. But this is based upon aerial diffusion and contact. This is not based upon the genetic approach. Right? So you talk about Niger-Congo dispersal. They're trying to connect it to the bow and arrow and spear because those are the only things that can be reconstructed. Now, I wonder if bow, arrow, and spear are reconstructed universally, right? Because he said no set of universal reconstructions. So how deep is bow and arrow and spear reconstructed across the nodes of Niger-Congo? There's no names for crops or domestic animals. Oh my God, bro. Y'all don't understand how funny this is. Y'all don't understand this. One proposal is that the introduction of the bow is marked by the spread of microlithic plants or microlithic points to the southwestern Sahara by the Unanian. And Unanian, some of the oldest points of the Unanian is on the Egypto-Libyan border, right? You see it recorded in modern-day Mali, in what is now Mali, 9,000 and 10,000 years ago. So you got an enhanced capacity to bring large mammals and would certainly provide significant competitive advantage. So again, if you look at the Onanian and you talk about the Sahara, micropoints, the Pleistocene, 12,000 years ago into the Holocene, early Holocene, these Niger-Congo would have been with Nilo-Saharans, in the Green Sahara if we use this model. So there was a deep intermingling of both. Blank was created by a specific variation of West Africans documented by white archaeologists. I don't know what you mean there. Was good, James. I might get into James's S&P after I'm done with this. Because James puts together a really, really good way of testing genetics. All of these genetics, they're not using African S&P arrays. They're not using African S&P arrays. Shout out to King's Monologue for bringing that up. I've been looking at genetics this whole time, and I never looked at the S&P arrays, the Eurasian S&P arrays. That's very, very important for us to realize. Yeah, so somewhat later, the development of canoes may have allowed other branches of Niger-Congo to disperse along West African waterways. You talking about the Dafuna canoe? With a culture that is similar to the culture in Kenya, or the so-called Iberian culture, or Burin, or the Kansiore culture, which in my analysis would be the pre-dialectical ancestor, of Paleo-African languages, using the historical comparative linguistic approach, right? So they haven't figured out the Kordofanian languages and why they're so remote. And then at some point, the waterways that brought Chadic speakers to West Africa from the Nile, they're saying Chadic West Africans came from the Nile basin. They may have attracted foragers eastward, ending in the Nuba Mountains. So they're saying it was a switch around. Nile Valley, Nile Basin. You see that Nile Basin populations migrated to West Africa. That's that L3F3. That's that CTS 693. That's that EV6 78, migrating eastward. That's that EZ 15941, right? Migrating westward and eastward, back and forth across the Sahelian waterways. We about to get into it. Right? So then you got Afro-Asiatic. Language phylum consists of 376 languages, right? You got 2 competing reconstructions of Afro-Asiatic languages proposed, Arid, Oral, and Stabova. And we went, if y'all saw when I was on Smash and I basically cooked Afro-Asiatic, you had Arid and Oral and Stabova, like less than 10%. I think it's 2% and 1 to 6% cognate match. But they're supposed to be using the same language family. Come on, bruh. Y'all supposed to be reconstructing the same family. And you got 2% and 6% cognate matches. I mean, if you've been paying attention to this debate, you'll see how crazy this Blench article is. The internal structure of Afro-Asiatic is extremely controversial, with almost every configuration possible being proposed. See a detailed review in Blench 1. In light of this, Figure 7 represents a compromise proposal. You got Elamite. Let me talk about the black Elamites. The Elamites were African. You got Elamite as Proto-Afro-Asiatic. I remember people talk about the Elamites being Dravidian. You got a so-called Dravidian language. I got to look into that. If Elamite, Dravidian. Because if that's part of Proto-Afro-Asiatic, is the Dravidian Afro-Asiatic? Is the Dravidian Afro-Asiatic? What do y'all think? What do y'all think about that? What do y'all think about Elamite as potentially Afro-Asiatic? Ethraic, Cushitic, Northern Afro-Asiatic, Chadic. What do y'all think about this? I think that's bullshit. I think Northern Afro-Asiatic. I think Semitic, Berber. I think that's crazy work. I think that's crazy. I mean, you put Egyptian right there. That's crazy work. To me, Egyptian would be in Chadic. It's closer to Chadic than anything. And then Cushitic after that. Semitic and Berber, all this is BS to me. But if you had a real breakdown, you put Egyptian next to Chadic and Cushitic, right? So look, you got Cushitic, you got some Somalis in here. They would be related to these West Africans under, Blench's proposal. A particular interesting question is whether Elamitic, the language isolated in ancient Iran, might have been an early branch of Afro-Asiatic, according to Blase 1999. If so, it argues for an early spread of Afro-Asiatic prior to Semitic. 2 quite different models of expansion of Afro-Asiatic are current in literature. So you got some people who say that the Near East was the origin of its dispersal. Others say that. I mean, most scholars I looked at said it was from Africa. So, you know what I'm saying? So, that's pretty. I mean, I think this is pretty interesting. What do y'all think of this? What do y'all think of this article? What do y'all think of these facts? He's saying that. Yeah, hidden, that's crazy. Egyptian closer to Semitic is crazy work. When you don't have like basic vocabulary matching, it don't match. So it's just like, these guys are crazy. Yeah, they're crazy with this stuff. And you got some Kunologists. They just accept these Afrikaners willy-nilly. The Kunologists just take it in. They just take it all in. So, And usually Khoisan is easily the most problematic phyla, primarily because the extent in which it constitutes genetic grouping is uncertain. They're spoken by scattered foragers and stuff, and it's just like, 23 Khoisan languages are spoken today. Obviously, you got that today, living languages. So you should be able to read to redo it, or you should be able to understand its internal coherence. So Khoisan is presently understood, was probably first outlined by Bleek, Wilhelm Bleek, in her Bushman, I don't know if that's Wilhelm, in her Bushman dictionary, but Greenberg is given credit for the click language grouping, later renaming it to Macro Khoisan. This was the grouping in a single phylum of all the languages with click sounds and not otherwise classified. This joined Adza and Sandawe in Tanzania. So he joined them by a mode of articulation, not by the comparative approach, right? So right here it says the link with Sandawe and Hadza is supported by Erit, but questioned by other Khoisanists. Elderkin for Sandawe, Sans for Hadza. Sans study of Khoisan relationships has shown that, especially in the case of Hadza, most of the lexical arguments advanced to support its affiliation rest on very doubtful correspondences or erroneous lexical citations. The language of Kwadi in southern Angola is known only from some field notes left by Westphal, and it's doubtful whether any Kwadi speakers exist today. So you got people arguing whether or not Kwadi is there. Archaeological evidence suggests that Khoisan type and culture may have been present in eastern and southern Africa for more than 100,000 years, and that those remaining are inheritors of this culture. The click languages of eastern Africa, such as the Hadza, point to the early foraging layer which preceded Bantu. Again, aerial diffusion type of situation. However, as Voisin points out, the expansion of food production occurred perhaps only 2,000 years ago in contact with Bantu and Cushitic livestock producers. The Ngota and Kwa branches of Khoisan are thus older layers, while Khoi is an innovative wave reflecting access to new subsistence strategies. Then you got Austronesian and Malagasy. We're not even really going to get into that. Then you got, some of these language isolates. So, these are the isolates that they can't really catch. And some of these people are, referred and referenced to the foragers. And he say it's biblical VS. The Bible. The Bible, but in the Bible, Egypt is Ham. So Ham wouldn't be Shem if you use the Bible. And Zeki asks, is the Egyptian language Nilo-Saharan? No, Merim and Kimi is not Nilo-Saharan. Right? It would be Paleo-African or Egypto-African using the Obangian approach. But it would not fall in Nilo-Saharan. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So these are some technological correlations. Again, you're applying material cultures to working hypotheses. Boo-boo. But this is what they do. So Afrikanist, again, ops. Those of y'all who know, those of y'all who know this should understand that they're ops, And anybody who follows this mode is an op. You know what I'm saying? Anybody who follows. But this article is really, really good. I think it's really, really positive about this. This is a really, really positive article. Now we're going to get into something special. We're going to get into something big time. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to read this paragraph. You know what I'm saying? We're going to talk about who is this article from? This is 22. I'm going to see who wrote this article. Because this is something that I was looking at before. This is chapter 1. And this is The Epistemology of Creative Destruction by Marshall Z. Balinga. And this is chapter 1 in these UNESCO papers, volume 10. He referenced Sertima in this article. We gonna see who Marshall Z. Balinga is. He's a sociologist, it looks like. He's a sociologist. Reputable guy. He got chapter 1 in the UNESCO papers, so he's a reputable guy. He's a reputable guy. So it looked like he's a sociology doctor. So we're going to look into his reference. He referenced Ivan van Sertima in this article in chapter 1 of volume 10 of the UNESCO Symposium. All of those who said that Ivan van Sertima is a pseudo, this is what he said. He said the discoveries trope is probably one of the most problematic in the writing of history, insofar as applying only to European conquest outside of Europe. It favors essentialist sentiments by naturalizing a technical inequality in history. Ivan van Sertima argues that there were nevertheless African nautical experiments predating those of the Portuguese, and Herodotus teaches us that the first circumnavigation of Africa can be traced to Pharaoh Nekau. This is the 26th dynasty, 610 to 595 BCE, around 2,000 years before the Portuguese endeavors. In short, it is the theme of discovery, that Columbian theme, in itself that carries an exteriority conducive to diffusionism and the obliteration of the indigenous creative element. So again, this is very, very fascinating, right? And he precedes this up here by talking about Christopher Columbus, right? The commemoration in 1992, the 500-year anniversary of Christopher Columbus's discovery. And Ivan van Sertima spoke in front of the Smithsonian in the U.S. Congress in relation to the idea that Columbus was not the first to cross the Atlantic, right? So there's a sociological dimension of the production of history that challenges the naive positivism that portrays a science impervious to its environment. So Kuhn, for those of you who are familiar with Africana studies and the epistemological nature of the African challenge to Western hegemony, Thomas Kuhn and Kuhnian scientists are very, very important with respect to that. Right, the Kuhnian paradigm, he talks about the incommensurability of science. Galileo science ain't Newton science, and Newton science ain't Einstein science, because they're using different rule sets, so they cannot necessarily be commensurate, right? So the usage of discover, is used to put natives as inferior, right? And this discovery notion is a product of Eurocentric power. This is what this article is attempting to relay to us, right? So this is a reference, again, the Modern UNESCO Symposium, Volume 10, references Ivan van Sertima's model of aquatic experiments, African nautical technology prior to Columbus, prior to the Portuguese, right? So I'm going to read the next selection because he's also referenced in volume 9. So in both volumes, Mr. Van Sertima, the scholar that a lot of these Kuhnologists, a lot of these Kuhnarians, if I borrow Afro think tank's term, they want to say that Ivan van Sertima is pseudoscientific. But the preeminent work on African scholarship in the UNESCO General History of Africa, Volume 9 and Volume 10, Van Sertima, is cited. He's cited. And you say, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Christians are told it means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some Bantu say it means this is for the Sabbath keepers. Okay, it's interesting. Would you consider yourself a Christian, Healthy Green? Are you viewing that from a Christian perspective, a biblical perspective? But that's very, very interesting. So, what do y'all think about this? What do y'all think about, we went through a lot. We went through the idea that, the African tribalism, the Bantoid, Niloid, Congoid, the Oid squad as I call them, they've been pretty much delegitimized by Blench. Blench displayed that these language phyla are hypothetical, they are not legit, and we should not take them seriously. Right? They are not considered genetically proven, and even associating them with these material cultures is tentative at best. It is tentative at best. What do y'all think about that? This has been some pretty good stuff, and we're only in the very, very beginning. This is a long book, and I'm gonna try to read it. I'm gonna try to go through it. It's gonna be members only, though. I meant for this to be members only, but I wanted this to be more public. Just dealing with a lot of these concepts. So we're gonna get to it. We're gonna keep it pushing. We're gonna keep it vibing. Give me a second. I meant to have I didn't even have, y'all gotta remind me, I didn't even have the tunes on. We've been going on, how long we been going? We've been going for about an hour. I need to entertain with some tunes. Yeah. Shout out to Healthy Green Lifestyle. I don't trust the scholars. They tell lies. 100%. A lot of these Western scholars do lie. Is Osiris of Nubia the founder of Egypt? Under certain understandings, you could say that. It's one of my favorite tunes. Yeah. Moving in the dough. We're moving in the grow. We're moving, we ain't po. All this richness. Ain't no wickedness, only blessings. Past the test stand. He says the Ethiopians are a colony drawn out them by the Osiris. Yeah, it's in Diodorus. It's in Diodorus Siculus. Yeah. I'm gonna start doing like freestyles, like public freestyles. Anybody who likes to rap, y'all could like join in. Yeah, Diodorus, that might even be a good thing to look into. Diodorus Siculus, the wickedness in my Siculus and yeah. What y'all want me to do some content on next after this? Give me some ideas. I'm listening in. Guys. Yeah, I'm about to do some Christian Kemet content. That's what I think I'm about to do. I'm about to do some Christian Kemet. Shout out to the supporters in the building. I appreciate y'all. But I'm gonna show y'all the I'm gonna show y'all the volume 9, because I feel like volume 9 is a little bit better than the reference for Sertima, and volume 9 is a little bit better than volume 10. But it depends. If you like technology, if you like the technological proof, then you may prefer volume 10. However, if you prefer some of the historical proof, then you might prefer volume 9. Hey. I'm looking for it, y'all. Baby. Baby. Alright, so this is gonna be, let me find the Africa and its diasporas. Let me find out. This scholar who wrote this, I'm gonna get y'all. So we have Marshall Zay Belinga, who wrote the previous one. This is gonna be a chapter 1 again. So they starting it out with the heat. You know, they starting it out with the heat. That's nice. That's nice. So you got Carol Boyce Davies, the epistemological basis for claiming black identities. Damn, that's that's work. I mean, bro, I'm gonna have to do. You know, I'm gonna have to do a show with Reggie about this. You see this title, the epistemological basis for claiming black identities. Everybody talking about black ain't scientific, black is outdated. You got the UNESCO papers, volume 10, talking about black identities, the epistemological basis for black identities. Let's look into Carol Boyce Davies. Let's look into her. She a professor. Okay. Oh, she wrote Left to Karl Marx. I think I remember that, about Claudia Jones from Trinidad Howard University of Maryland. All right, I see you. She be doing that. She be dropping the heat. Okay, she dropping the heat. That's good. That's really, really good. Perfect. Really. So right here, let me read up. So this is a part of the article, Global Africanity in the African Diaspora. In the essay entitled From Pax Africana to Global Africana in the Global African, Portrait of Ally Amos Musri. I think the music is a little bit too loud. Alright. About to get it in. Alright. Daryl C. Thomas demonstrates that global Africa starts to arise from Masri in 1974, when he reaffirmed the clarion call by Du Bois for African and third world people to escape death and isolation and to nurture the latent African genius. According to Locksley's Edmondson's Personal Communication, Masri coined the term even earlier during their days together at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, as they thought to build an African international relations project from their location in East Africa. Here, the idea of global Africa encounters the theoretics of Pan-Africanism, of which Masri identified 5 dimensions: sub-Saharan, trans-Saharan, transatlantic, Western Hemispheric, and global. According to Thomas, Masri would continuously refine the scope of global Africa and go on to use it as a framework for his television series, The Africans, A Triple Heritage. Masri would subsequently define global African identity to include Africa and its diaspora in his Africans and African Americans in Changing World Trends, Globalizing the Black Experience. Thus, the definition of global Africa can be attributed to Ali Masri in his attempt to find a theoretical language to address the issues of diasporization arising from the Howard University School, which had always been a site for the study and articulation of the concept of the African diaspora. While African studies at Howard universities were initially spearheaded by William Leo Hansberry, other scholars such as Joseph E. Harris at Howard's History Department also subsequently worked on the African diaspora in Asia. Global Africa and the African diaspora were therefore terms used simultaneously from the start, or used at times dialectically the former specific to political science and international relations, the latter used more in humanities and in anthropology. Before Masri, the idea of building a global freedom struggle preoccupied all early Pan-Africanists who would actually use the language of globality. It is also possible at this point to cite David Walker, who wrote Appeal